is the only non-engineer of the family of engineers. She didn't want to plug colas and cookies, and she wanted to work on climate change. Of course, I know Prachi personally, and I've seen her behave like a 5-year-old kid to a 40-year-old grown-up woman. So at 23, Prachi is also a runner, a diver, a surfer, and of course, a voracious reader. Am I missing anything, Prachi, here? So now let me call upon Prachi, a communicator, climate entrepreneur, and the founder of Cool the Globe. Prachi, over to you. And after this, we are soon catching over that big thali, which both of us love. Over to you.
I think I just want to take you everywhere with me to introduce me, because I don't think even I can do it so well. So thank you so much for inviting me here. And, I'm very happy to be with all of you today, because I think one of my first memories of Rotary clubs was when my school did a project with one of the local Rotaries. And I remember being in awe of everybody who was there, because I had never before heard of people setting aside time in their day-to-day life to actually do something of meaning. And so that was my first moment of meeting people, wanting to make a difference. So in many ways, Rotary has been an inspiration for me. And so I'm very happy to be with all of you today. So I'll just share my screen. Just give me a minute. Yes. Yes, can you see my screen?
Yeah, Prachi, please go ahead.
Yes. So first of all, I'm very surprised that all of you came here on such a nice evening to listen to me talk about climate change for some 40-45 minutes, because nobody wants to listen to someone talk about the environment for so long. And I know this because one of the first times I remember hearing about climate change is again in school during our environmental science lectures. And every time we would have a lecture like that, I used to roll my eyes and say, oh, not another boring lecture again. So is this going to be a 40-minute boring lecture that has no impact on your lives? It could be, but I'm hoping that it won't be. So in the interest of not making this boring, I hope that all of you would, talk to me, give your comments as well, because if I have to talk alone for so long, I'm afraid it could be. And secondly, in the interest again of making this interesting, we are not going to talk about the sad and depressing part of climate change. We are only going to talk about two things today, plain and simple. We're going to talk about two simple questions that I asked myself as a young girl. And by the end of this lecture, I hope that all of you would have found your own versions of your answers to those questions. Now, in the process of asking myself the first question, it started, as Praveen mentioned, I come from a family full of engineers, and I'm the only non-engineer in a family. And when I decided to take a different career, an unconventional career, when I was making this decision, what field am I going to enter into? One of the first things I looked up is how many hours am I actually going to spend in my professional life? I looked up the answer and I was very surprised to see it. So I would love to ask this to you as well. Does anybody have any guesses? How many hours do we spend at work during our lifetimes? Any guesses? No, you can tell me your guess in the chat box as well. So I looked up this answer and I was very surprised to see that the average person spends 80,000 hours at work. And when I saw that, we all know that it takes 10,000 hours for someone to become an expert at something. So I thought if all of us give at least even 10% of our professional time and expertise to solving some real challenges around us, then that would make all of us an expert in making the world around us a better place. And I don't need to tell that to all of you members of Rotary, because you're already doing that. But that's when I decided that when I did take up media as my career of choice, I decided that I wanted to solve some real challenge around me. And so one day during my first semester of college, I Googled, what is the biggest problem in the world right now? And that's when climate change popped up. Now, I was very surprised to see that, because while everybody on the internet, all of these big organizations, world leaders were talking about how climate change is a pressing issue that we need to do something about, nobody around me was really talking about it. And so I asked myself the first question: why should I care about climate change? And I think that's a very valid question to ask. When I did ask myself that, I had enough on my plate. I had assignments to submit, friends to make, extracurriculars to pay attention to, exams to give. So amidst all of that, why should I care about something like climate change? And today I'm going to tell you a journey, my own journey of finding an answer to this question. So one of the first questions that comes after that is, what even is climate change? So climate change is very simple. Right now, it's 1 degree Celsius. The Earth's average temperature has risen on an average by 1 degree Celsius compared to pre-industrial times. The Earth's surface is rising at an unprecedented rate. Some of the warmest years on record have happened in the past 20 years. And right now we're between 1 degree Celsius rise. If we go to 2 degrees Celsius, for example, over 70% of the world's coastal areas would go underwater. If we go between 3 to 4 degrees Celsius, extreme weather events would start happening extremely frequently and extremely intensely. Above between 5 to 6 degrees Celsius, we would start seeing an impact in our day-to-day lives. And after 7 to 8 degrees Celsius, nobody even goes that far, because we don't want to think about what happens after that. So this is essentially what I read. We are living in a 1 degree Celsius world right now, where the Earth's average temperature has risen. So who are the villains in this story? Is these guys, carbon dioxide, fluorinated gases. If you've seen the movie Houseful, at the end of the movie, everybody starts laughing. That's because of this nitrous oxide, the laughing gas. That's one of the greenhouse gases as well, methane. And I want you to remember all of their names, because these are the guys who are trapping the sun's heat into the Earth's atmosphere and rising the temperature of the Earth. And as you can see, CO2 is the ringleader of this story of villains. But I think they are actually being framed. They're not the real villains in the story. I think somebody else is actually pulling the trigger. So who could be the real villain in this story? Does anybody have any guesses? Who is the real villain? It's not the greenhouse gases.
The chart shows carbon dioxide.
Yes, so carbon dioxide is one of the greenhouse gases, one of the 4 greenhouse gases. And even though the chart shows this, and even though everybody says that climate change is happening because of greenhouse gases, because of them trapping the heat into our atmosphere, the real villains are actually us. Humans. In everything we do, we emit greenhouse gases. We buy things, we go to places, we travel, we build homes, we make things, we build houses, and in all of those activities, we emit greenhouse gases. So greenhouse gases are actually the heroes in the story. Without them, we wouldn't exist. The Earth would be too cold, and civilizations and plants won't thrive. So what's the problem here? If my grandmother is anything like your grandmother, she would say that too much of anything is bad. And that's exactly what's happening. 280 parts per million of carbon dioxide is how much CO2 the Earth needs. But because of industrialization and human activities, it's almost double of that. We have 413 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. Today, in fact, it was 416 parts per million. And the current highest levels of CO2 we have in the atmosphere are the highest in 14 million years. So what is that leading to? It's extreme weather events are happening more intensely and more frequently. Flooding, wildfires, storms, droughts are happening around the world. Sea level rise, so they say that Mumbai may go underwater in the coming years. Changes in the rain patterns. So Indian monsoon is one of the big areas which would be affected by climate change. Retreat of glaciers, loss of biodiversity. We've heard chapters and chapters on that in school. So I looked up all of these impacts of climate change. And then I asked myself again, do I now care about climate change? And that's something I want to ask to all of you as well. After hearing all of this, do you care about climate change?
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Yes. So a few people are saying yes. And I think you have an edge over me because you have a lot of age and wisdom to your side. But when I first asked myself this question, after looking at all of these big, scary things, I said that, while this looks very sad and very bad, I don't actually care about climate change enough to do something about it. And so I left climate change for a while. I let it sit aside, and I decided that I want to do something which has something to do with people, which has an actual impact, and it's not happening on some other corner of the world. And in the process of that, even as a media professional, I got an opportunity to work on very different areas, and I got an opportunity to talk to and work with different kinds of people from all walks of life. And it was those people, those voices behind these catastrophic impacts of climate change who taught me about climate change what no other global experts could. And so I want to tell you about some of them today. And the first person who taught me about climate change, I think somebody, I can hear somebody's background. Yes. So I'm going to tell you about some of those people who really changed my mind about why I should do something about climate change. And one of the first people is this 12-year-old boy that I met when I was making a film on children and what their dreams look like. And he lived in a slum, not very far from my house. The day I met him, I asked him a simple question. I asked him, if you could reports I had read about how climate change was driving people away from their homes, 10 million people every year and counting. And I realized that, these extreme weather events, these flooding that I read in the newspaper is not just about that. As flooding happens more frequently, more intensely, as water erupts more frequently into roughly built slums, there will be more and more young boys like him who have to worry about something as basic as a shelter above their head. And I realized this is something that I do care about. The second person I want to tell you about is this extremely bright girl that I met when I was volunteering with an NGO that worked in education. And when I met her, I asked her, which standard are you in? And she said, I don't go to school these days. Why is that? It's because her house got water only for 2 hours in the afternoon, and nobody else in her home could afford to stay at home during that time. So this girl, she had to skip school and stay at home to fill buckets with water. Now, what does this have to do with climate change? This is when, as I was walking home back, after talking to this girl, I started thinking about why this is happening. And I realized that this was around the time that Pune was seeing a drought, and a Khadakwasla dam, which gives us water, had dried up. So water was being used scarcely throughout the city. But little did I know that this extreme weather event would lead to this bright young girl staying at home to fill buckets with water. So climate change impacts our water. And I realized that this is something that I do care about. The third person I want to tell you about is one of the most inspiring women I've met. And I met her when I was working with colony of displaced waste workers on the outskirts of Bangalore. And when I met her, she was around the same age as me. She was 18 or 19, but she was already married and she had this small daughter at hand. And she was a refugee from Bangladesh. When I met her, I walked 5 kilometers with her to the nearest school, where we went inside the school, and she asked the teacher if her daughter could be enrolled into class. But she couldn't because she didn't know the language Kannada, neither did she have the necessary documents. But this woman, she didn't give up. For the next 2 months, every single day, she walked the 5 kilometers to the school. She sat at the doorstep and she demanded that her daughter be enrolled into class. And finally, the school saw a way around the technicalities, around the language barriers, and her daughter got a place in the classroom. Now, what does this have to do with climate change? Let's talk about millions of climate refugees who every year, like this young woman, have to completely disrupt their lives because their homes are not habitable anymore, because their homes have seen extreme weather events, and they have to completely build their lives from scratch in an unknown area, often with children in hand. I realized that this is something that I do care about. Now, another incident I want to talk to you about is something that happened not very far from my home. A few years ago, it rained like I had never seen it raining before. And I sat scared, even sitting in the safety of the four walls of my house. But little did I know, many people had lost their homes that night. And the next morning, as I went on a walk to see the aftermath of what had happened, I saw a dead cattle lying on top of a car, and next to it was this old couple trying to retrieve their only source of livelihood, which was destroyed in the storm the night before. That's when I realized that climate change impacts our livelihoods. For many people, it impacts their ability to fend for their families. And I thought this is something that I do care about. Another person I would like to talk to you about, I spent months with farmers in Maharashtra with a group called Abhinav Farmers Club. And I traveled across Maharashtra to meet many small dwelling farmers. And one of them was an old farmer who taught me something about climate change that no global experts could. He said that small farmers like me just can't afford to keep doing it anymore because the weather has become so unreliable. And it's not just about me. When a farmer like me cannot grow food, behind me are standing many, many people who cannot afford to buy food. So climate change means that more and more people go hungry. I realize that this is something that I do care about. So forget about these impacts of climate change, flooding, wildfire, sea level rise. Forget about these things for a while. As ordinary people, we care about very simple things. We care about our food, we care about our home, we care about our health, we care about our livelihoods, and most importantly, we care about our families and the people around us. And I realized that I do care about climate change because it impacts all of these things that matter to me very dearly. And only when I decided that I do care about climate change, did I ask myself the second question: what can I then do about climate change? Now, finding an answer to this was not very easy because I could see the impacts of climate change, but I thought, what can I as an ordinary girl do about this? And so I did what any young girl faced with a problem would do. I went to my parents and I asked them, what can I do about climate change? And I'll tell you a bit about that in a while. But before that, the next question that comes is, why should we do something now What is the urgency? And for that, I want you to imagine a bathtub with an open tap of water flowing in. And the earth is like this bathtub. And we are putting 51 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere every year. And even if we slow the flow of that tap, even if we reduce the flow of that tap, someday or the other, the water is going to overflow. And the same way, as long as we keep emitting greenhouse gas emissions, someday or the other, we are going to reach tipping points. Now, those tipping points are going to come in the next 3 decades. And tipping points are places from which we can never come back. So climate change is an irreversible problem, and we only have 3 decades to do something about it, to avoid the worst effects of climate change. So the world must have some goals in front of it to deal with it, right? And so I want you to know the global goals that countries have set for themselves to deal with climate change. The first goal is to reduce our emissions by half by 2030, and we have to come to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 to keep the temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, how are the world leaders faring in doing this? So if every so often all world leaders meet, all politicians meet, and they decide what to do with climate change. And they have set some goals, some targets in front of them to help solve this problem. But according to the best estimates that we have available today, if we rely on them, then our emissions would only end up increasing by a little bit instead of decreasing. So clearly there's something missing in the picture. Despite the best efforts by countries, by leaders, by legislators, we are not doing enough about climate change. And what's missing is people. So when I was in school, I used to look at history lectures and I used to think, these were such interesting times. So many interesting things were happening that time where you could actually make a difference. And I used to always think the times we live in today are very boring. But after I started working on this, I realized that we find ourselves at the cusp of our youth in perhaps some of the most defining decades of human existence. And how we act today is going to determine not only our future, but the future of many, many generations to come. And as much as that is a responsibility, it's an opportunity to do something which is going to make a big difference. So as ordinary people, we often forget the impact we can make, the power we have when we come together to take action. And so again, I asked myself, what is the action I can take on climate change? And so I went to my father and I asked this to him. And we decided that as a family, we would reduce our own greenhouse gas emissions by 10% every year. In order to do that, we started researching on what are the simple actions we can take in our day-to-day life to achieve that target. Which activities of mine are leading to these emissions, and how can I keep track of all of this? As I started looking at that, two very strange things happened. The first strange thing was that I started to enjoy it. It almost became like a fun game that I was playing with my family. And from the hopelessness of just hearing about what's happening to the world, it was replaced with a lot of optimism that at least at my own level, I was doing something. And the second strange thing that happened was that so many of my relatives, my friends came to me and said, I think you're doing something interesting and we want to join in. And that's when I started thinking, how can I take citizens from around the world in this individual quest that I've taken on? And from this was born Cool the Globe. We built an app which would have ordinary citizens like you and I come together to do something about climate change. Now, in order to do anything at all, to achieve anything at all, what are some things that you think we need? What are some things that we as humans need to achieve anything at all? Does anybody have any answers? What do you need? You need, passion, you need perseverance. What are some qualities we need to achieve anything?
Passion, very true. Yeah, one has to have a Josh, Karna, something like that.
Very true.
I think the first thing is mission.
Discipline. Yeah, that's right. Wow.
True, true.
Yes. So what I thought was that, firstly, you need a clear goal, know what to do. Like Rahul says, you need to have a clear goal in front of you to know exactly what you want to achieve. And the second thing you need is that this is a mission. You need to have a clear mission in front of you. And the second thing you need is that you need to know how you're doing on that goal. You need to be able to measure your own progress. And so we decided to integrate these two things in the app. So as soon as a user comes inside the app, they are given a clear monthly and an annual target of reducing their own greenhouse gas emissions. And then they can see a host of simple actions that they can take in their day-to-day lives to achieve that target. And they can also see the emissions they avoided by doing that. So for example, if I take a cycle to my office instead of taking a car, I can see that I save 2 kg of greenhouse gas emissions. If I don't buy 2 saris this month, I see that I save 10 kg of greenhouse gas emissions. If I did not use AC the whole day, because it's anyway quite cold outside, I save 8 kg of greenhouse gas emissions. So I see the impact I'm making with simple day-to-day climate actions. But what can one individual do? Is something that a lot of people ask. But I believe, and we believe, that when a lot of individuals like us come together to make an impact, then the collective impact can be extraordinary. And to show the power of that collective impact, we have a global meter on the app, which shows the savings made by everyone combined. And so I worked on this app while I was in college, and by the time I graduated, it was ready. But we realized that the real work has only just begun. The real work is in actually convincing people that in the face of climate change, they can do something, that in the face of climate change, their actions matter. So we started making simple videos about what people can do about climate change and about what we were doing. And those videos were really picked up by citizens. People shared it with their friends shared it with their friends. And before we knew it, millions of citizens from around the world were watching those videos. Now we have over 15,000 users from 55 countries coming together to take action on climate change through this platform. And we were contacted by leaders, policymakers, entrepreneurs, CEOs on how they could help our mission. But more importantly, what really mattered to us were the ordinary people who got in touch with us. So a 9-year-old girl emailed me saying that I don't really have a phone, but I still want to do something about climate change. So she asked me, what can I do? What changes can I make in my life for this? And she had understood a simple concept that we as adults often don't understand, which is that actions matter a lot more than words. And this is a lesson I learned from this girl. On the other hand, an 86-year-old woman called me up and said that I'm retired now. I don't get out of the house much, but I leave the lights open in my house during the afternoons, and I'm going to stop doing that from today. And that would be my contribution to this mission. A 35-year-old man called me up and said that ever since I've got this app and I'm seeing the impact my actions are making, I've purchased a cycle. And I go to my office on a cycle every day now. I've been doing it for a month. And he said that my health has improved so much. I'm happier. And this is the action that he decided to take. On the other hand, another person translated our videos in Hindi, in regional languages, so many more people could understand them. And this is the kind of pure citizen engagement that we saw. And that's how this personal quest that I had turned into a tool for climate action, and it then turned into a citizen-led movement. And that has been our journey so far. And now I think we come to perhaps the most important part, what can you do to make a difference? So I think the first thing you can do is, like me, decide to reduce our own emissions by 10%. Now 10% is a very easy target. It means just doing some simple actions, maybe for 3 days in a month. And so the second part says scold your parents, but that's not for you, that's for your children. I was speaking to a group of school children this morning, and I asked them to scold their parents, because we as adults often tend to overlook things that really matter, and children often have a perspective on that. So when I met a group of school children this morning, I asked them all to scold their parents on their actions. The third thing you can do is you can, all of you are so influential in your own communities, and I know that you're already doing things that matter, that are so important, and I know how important your voice is. So you can help by becoming a Cool the Globe advocate. I learned that when I take an action, it inspires so many people around me to follow suit, and it creates wildfire of change. And that is the power that all of your voices have today. So I would love to have you as CTG advocates and mentors. And I would love to have you involved, because we have experienced that no matter what your profession, what your age or locality is, everybody can do something about this in their own lives. So we would love to have some of you as advisors, as our mentors, to just help take this forward in your own careers. And we also need money, so we would need help from some of you to on how we can actually get money to keep taking this forward. And lastly, what you can do is decide your own action. Now, I'm here not only to tell you to take action, to do something about climate change because it's the right thing to do, but I'm also here to tell you to do that because it's the fun thing to do. Do it for the fun reasons. I can personally attest that ever since I started doing something about climate change, my life has substantially improved. I've improved my friendships, my relationships, I've improved my career, my connections, and I've just gotten a lot more happy in life because I'm leading with purpose. So decide your own action, and decide your action that also suits with other areas of your life. If you want to become healthy, then decide to walk more instead of taking your car. Decide to use a cycle. If you want to save money, then purchase an electric vehicle and save on petrol, or ask your or maybe spend a little less on shopping and buy a little less materials. If you get a lot of cold, then stop using your AC. So take an action which resonates with your life, which resonates with the other areas of your life. Decide an action that you're going to start taking from this month, and be a part of this this community of citizens who are making a difference in their own day-to-day lives. So thank you so much for calling me here today. I had a great time talking to all of you, and I would love to hear your comments and if you have any questions.
Thank you, Prachi. 45 minutes to one yaar. We were waiting actually 45 minutes ago.
Oh, no. So the rest of the time is for you to talk.
You missed a chance to lecture us.
You said scold your parents, sir. I'm sorry, I can't do that. Actually, that climate change, my son is going to...
I will send this to your son. He will do that.
Prachi, how much does one tree, if you plant a tree, how much carbon sequestering does it do, and how much does it offset in terms of carbon emission?
Yeah, so for tree plantation, it's a little bit more complex because it depends on the nature of the tree, its length, its width. So I would send you data on a very vague averages, but there are carbon sequestration projects that that one can be involved in. So in the app, we have a social responsibility section where one can purchase carbon offsets from tree plantation projects, and they have various kinds of trees. So they are able to come to averages of exactly how many emissions they are saving. So it really ranges a lot, but planting trees is a great area. So all of these other areas that we take up, they are avoiding our future greenhouse gas emissions. But by planting trees, you can actually take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So in all other ways, climate change is an irreversible problem, but planting trees is one of the ways to reverse it even by a little bit.
Now, Apurva has a question, Prachi. He says that the mask we use and the PPE kits we use, full
Yeah.
body masks,
Yes.
what do you do so that you can recycle them? And what do you do that it does not go into landfill?
Right. That's an excellent question. So I think a good way is to just not use plastic masks to begin with. The masks have single-use plastic, so it's not very easy to recycle them. A lot of the parts of that mask do not get recycled. To start with, just not using plastic mask is a good way. And I'll also just get into the app and show you the emissions behind single-use plastic. So if we use 1 kg of plastic, that means we emit 5.7 kg of greenhouse gas emissions behind making 1 kg of plastic. Trying to reduce the use of plastic is one way. With mask, it's many times it becomes, it gets difficult to avoid that. So in compensation for that, you can keep a bag in your house for all the plastic you're using, and just segregating that waste properly also does a lot. So if you're using single-use masks, instead of just throwing them in your dustbin, try and segregate them as single-use plastic, and try and segregate all plastic you use in your house. And then you can even set up a system in your community where all of that plastic is segregated properly, and the part of that plastic which can get recycled goes to companies. Dell as a company just recently committed to using ocean plastic to make their laptops. So there are many companies like that are using recycled plastic. So I was working with an organization called Hasrudala in Bangalore, so they work a lot with waste segregation. During that time, I came across one retired old man. He was about 75 years of age, and he had built a big company during his prime years. And he told me, now that I'm retired, I have taken it upon myself that not a single waste unit goes out of my community. So he had streamlined his entire community. He had disciplined everyone to segregate their waste. He had set processes so that all the wet waste would get composted and all the dry waste would get segregated and then recycled. So all it takes is one person in a community to decide that they want to do something about waste management. With masks, I think just avoiding usage and then waste management are two good ways.
Excellent. Prachi, I just wanted to ask, this is my personal question to you. At 23, I could not button myself. How do you have so much akal at 23, man?
Maybe after we have that thali lunch, you can answer this for yourself.
All right, now Tejas has a question. Will reducing non-veg consumption in diet help climate change?
Yes. That is in fact one of the big areas that a person as an individual can make a difference. I will just tell you exactly what difference you will make by doing that. Give me a minute. I have this app in front of me, and I'll just select poultry. So if you don't, a person eating non-veg, I think eats 1 kg of poultry in a month. So if you don't just eat 1 kg of poultry, so that means you don't eat, 5 dishes of chicken, you save 4 kg of greenhouse gas emissions. If you don't eat beef, not eating 1 kg of beef saves 20 kg of CO2 emissions. Not eating pork, 1 kg of pork emits 6 kg of CO2 emissions. So food is one of the big areas that we can make a change in our personal life, but it is of course not a dietary recommendation. So everybody's context is different. Everybody's needs are different. So it's not really necessary to give up on it altogether. One can just start from reducing it. Or these days, everybody knows the calories in their food. So just the same way, knowing the emissions behind our food makes a big difference. Even knowing the emissions behind our actions makes a big difference. Yes.
Excellent, Prachi. Now, Deepal is asking a question: how to best lead a sustainable lifestyle, and how does that impact climate change?
Yes. So I think the best way to do it is, like I said, decide some other goals you have in your life and see how sustainability fits into that. If your goal is to be healthy, decide, how you can be sustainable, healthy, how you can have a healthier life by living sustainably. If your goal is to make more and more friends and connections, then decide to talk about sustainability with a friend. Integrate sustainability in a way that it complements all other goals of your life. And it's also very important to quantify it. So in order to keep doing it, we need to know exactly the difference we are making and the progress we are making. So a lot of people decide to lead a sustainable life, and then they feel discouraged because they don't know if their simple actions are actually making a difference. So just the way we know the calories in our food, know the emissions saved with your sustainable actions, and know the emissions behind your actions. So start measuring your goal to lead a sustainable lifestyle, and try and improve that goal by just a little bit every month, every year. Try and improve it. Start small and grow gradually. And then obviously it has a very big impact on climate change. So for a long time, all of these big organizations did not talk about what individuals can do about climate change because they didn't think that we could measure individual actions. But just recently, IPCC and International Energy Association have come up and said that in the goal to become net zero by 2050, 7% contribution must come from individual actions and individual lifestyle and behavioral change. Now that 7% will only be achieved by if all of us decide to take a small action, to decide to reduce our own emissions by 10% by leading a sustainable lifestyle, and then make 6 of our friends do the same thing. So it's not only important to live sustainable life yourself, but also it's also important to talk about it and to inspire many of your friends to follow suit.
There is one concerned person. I mean, so he loves his non-vegetarian, and he says, "Okay, fine, I'll give up chicken. Can I eat eggs at least?" He's asking that.
Yeah. So you can, if you can eat whatever you want. Like if it's I'll always say, don't start with things that are difficult for you to do. Start with things that are easy. Just know the emissions behind each of those things. And
And there is one concerned husband as well. How much carbon emission does wife fuming at you lead to?
wife fuming at you.
That you lead to?
Your wife fuming at you. Oh.
Should we stop that? Kunal is asking this question. Any suggestion on how to tackle electronic waste disposal? That is youth chargers, phones, computers, accessories,
Right.
that are leading to landfills, etc.
Yeah.
And what can we do individually or as a group to save that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and not one that I get very often. Not a lot of people know about this. So, kudos to you for even asking that question. So, smartphones, mobiles, tablets lead to 20 kg of CO2 emissions just in manufacturing, and then laptops lead to about 150 kg of emissions, and then TV also leads to about 50 kg of greenhouse gas emissions. So all of these gadgets just in production lead to a lot of emission, and then in the electricity they take up, more emissions follow. So I think a lot of these are recyclable. Some parts of these are recyclable, some are not, but segregating them properly also makes a difference. So recycling parts that could be recycled stops everything from going to landfills. So there are many vendors who take old laptops. In fact, some companies also take your old gadgets, old laptops, and use some of the parts for recycling. So always giving it back to your company. It also saves you money in buying the next laptop. So that is a good way. You can also just contact a vendor who is helping with recycling in your community, and that would help with all recycling problems, not just of electronic gadgets.
Excellent. Any other questions, please? Or over to you, Gautam.
Yeah, I just had a interesting observation. I was reading somewhere that plastic, which is one big cause of pollution and climate change today was, the production and use of plastic was initially propagated as a solution to deforestation. Because when you use plastic, you would actually stop cutting trees, which was, paradoxically, look where it has led us, I would say. So I think maybe some sort of balance needs to be found over the cutting of trees and using tree products vis-a-vis plastic. What do you say to that, Prachi?
Wow, that's a very interesting thing. I didn't know that actually.
Prachi, I will add to this question. So one-time use plastic was supposed to be not good, but after COVID, it has to be, it is proven to be beneficial. For example, is one-time syringe, one-time needle, one-time mask. Everything is one time after COVID, right?
Yeah. So what do we do about that? Right?
Yeah.
Yes. So in COVID, there are many times situations where we can't avoid it. For COVID, it became very often a necessity. But in our day-to-day lives, many times it's not a necessary; it's just a convenience. I would say when it's a necessity, go for it, but know the emissions behind it and try and compensate for that in other areas. And when it's only a convenience, try and go for the sometimes more difficult route of using paper instead of plastic, of avoiding using plastic, taking your own things with you. And then as we as ordinary citizens put more and more pressure and say that we don't want to use single-use plastic, then it's not just about our own action. It creates a ripple effect for more systemic level changes. There'll be more funding for innovations for alternative uses of single-use plastic. There'll be more pressure on policymakers to come up with solutions that are equally convenient for us. That public pressure, public just not wanting to use plastic will be a great motivator for other solutions.
Great. I think Anandji has raised his hand. So do you have a question, Anandji?
हाँ, प्राची, tell us कि हम हमारी बाकी सब एक्टिविटीज ऐसे ही चालू रखें, लेकिन कितने पेड़ या क्या एक्टिविटी ऐसा करें तो ये सब नलिफाई हो जाए. जो भी कुछ हम डिस्ट्रॉय कर रहे हैं, जो भी कुछ हम कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड फैला रहे हैं, वो नलिफाई हो जाए.
चिकन भी खाए, सब यूज करें, लेकिन ऑक्सीजन इन द एयर.
So, sir, इसका इशू ये है कि you can't nullify जो एटमॉस्फेयर में है वो ऑलरेडी रहेगा और हमेशा रहेगा. और इसीलिए क्लाइमेट चेंज इतना बड़ा इशू है बिकॉज you can't reverse what has already happened. तो जो कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड अभी एटमॉस्फेयर में है वो हमेशा रहेगा. और कुछ इनोवेशंस और टेक्नोलॉजीज ऐसे है जो एटमॉस्फेयर से कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड ले सकते हैं. फॉरेस्टेशन इज वन ऑफ द and we can build pressure on government and investors to invest in technologies that sequester carbon. The reason there's not enough being done about it is because people like us don't care enough about this. और आपके जैसे लोग जितना ज़्यादा ऐसे क्वेश्चन पूछेंगे उतने ज़्यादा इनोवेशंस बनेंगे जो कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड एटमॉस्फेयर से ले सकते हैं.
प्राची, देखिए स्टैटिस्टिक्स ऐसा बता रहा है कि पर हेड हमारे इंडिया में 28 पेड़ हैं, ऐसा गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया का स्टैटिस्टिक्स डिपार्टमेंट कह रहा है. और उनका ये कहना है कि ये नंबर बहुत कम है as compared to some better countries. Even a country like more populated country like China is having a more than 80-90 trees per head than as compared to 28 trees of India. Or similarly, even USA, Canada, they are having a much more higher than this. तो क्या हम हमारे नंबर बढ़ा दें by making a legislation or maybe by some program of government of India or state government? क्या ये प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व हो सकता है? हम 28 की जगह पे समझो और 28 पेड़ ऐड कर दे पर हेड, तो क्या ये प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व हो सकता है?
राइट. एक्चुअली इंडिया में अब खुद के लेवल पे हम ऐसे कर सकते हैं बिकॉज इन इंडिया हर किसी का एमिशंस लाइक एवरीबडी एमिट्स 3 tons of greenhouse gases every year. And with trees, I think on an average, I'm not sure about the exact number, but I think per tree, so one carbon offset, if you purchase one carbon offset, you can reduce 100 tons of 100 kg of greenhouse gases. One carbon offset would be, I think, about 1 hectare of land. So वो calculation, I'm not sure, I'll get back to you on that. But at a personal level, I think if one person plants about 20, I'm not sure about the exact number here. Praveen, I'll get back to you on that. But I think
so 1 acre, actually 1 acre of land leads to 2 tons of carbon sequestering.
1 acre?
1 acre of land leads to 2 tons of carbon sequestering.
Oh, really? Okay. So then we need 1.5 acres of land per person because every person emits 3 tons every year in India. So 1.5 acres. So if any of you have land and if you plant trees 1.5 acres, you can sequester carbon. Otherwise, you can pay for other carbon sequestration projects. I think Praveen is also doing a lot on that. So you can pay other people to do it for you.
Thank you, Prachi.
Thank you, Prachi. I think that was very, very informative, and it made a lot of us think and revisit the real need for something of this sort. Okay, with that, I call upon Mohan Joshi to give the formal vote of thanks. Also, friends, I would like to inform you that for personal reasons, of course, because he is going to be spending a lot of time in Pune, Mohan Joshi has decided to step down as a trustee because he will not be able to provide the time required to do justice. We really appreciate the service and the hard work that he has put in the role as a trustee. Of course, he will continue to be our Rotarian and help wherever possible. It's only as a trustee that he's stepping down. And Apurva Nanavati will be stepping in from the 1st of October. So congratulations to Apurva, and a special note of thank you and appreciation for Mohanji, and a big round of applause for all the work that he has done as a trustee. So Mohanji, thank you, and please go ahead with the vote of thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, President. Prachi, great lecture given to us today. And when I wanted to give vote of thanks, I was really struggling for words. What should I say after such an excellent speech? And my very senior Rotarian friend, Dr. Shamlal Khanna, came to my rescue when he put up in chat box very articulate and educative speech. So thank you for giving us such wide overview on the subject. Now all of us read, listen on TV about flooding, wildfires. Practically every day we see this news coming on TV, but we still feel that it's quite far away from us, and don't worry about that. We also talk about sustainability or 3 Ps like people, planet, and profit, but somehow we always felt that it is still far away from us. And I think what your lecture has given us today, it has created a lot of awareness on the subject. And whenever we listen or hear on the subject in future, I am sure you will act as a catalyst to create more awareness in us. So we will always remember you, and you will be our catalyst, and probably you will act as a trigger where we do more on the subject as a Rotarian. So thank you very much for accepting our invitation and giving us opportunity to get wider perspective on the subject. As we talked at the beginning about your parents, please convey our appreciation for the good work that they have done in developing you and giving us such wide exposure. Thank you, Prachi, and all the best.
Thank you so much, sir. It means a lot. And I really had a great time talking to all of you. And, I hope that, this is the beginning of a great association between all of us, and we keep talking and keep working together. And, I've even given my number and my email in the chat box. I would love to talk to all of you personally after this also. So thank you so much.
A couple of our members are actually also asking, they probably will be contacting you for some of because we do a lot of projects, so I'm sure some of them will contact you. So great. Over to you, Tejas, for secretary's announcements.
Thanks, Gautam. So we have some more programs coming up in the next couple of weeks. Today we had about 35 attendees in this program, so that's a good attendance from our club. Upcoming events on 3rd October, we have the Lehman Housing Freeze. This time the topic is going to be elections in cooperative housing societies, and it's presented by our own Rotarian Hiradal Susarji. On 16th of October, in the Health is Wealth seminar, we have a topic which is on me. To operate or not is the question, and it's going to be presented by Dr. Kshitij Shah. Thanks, Gautam.
Thank you. I now conclude the meeting and open the floor for chit chat. So, all right. So, Prachi, where do you go from here? What do you do? What's your target for the coming year?
That's I switched my mind off all the difficult questions.